I think this is the first time I've made a video about just like how bummed I am about something. I don't really have a plan or direction for it. I just kind of want to talk for a little bit. For months now, we've just been seeing more layoffs and studio closures in the games industry. And while this used to feel like something that would happen to maybe a company that had been outwardly struggling for a while, they may be having a rough go of it financially and put out a couple duds recently, but they made great things in the past, so you're still sad to see them go. Now it's been like an onslaught of studios making great popular things right now who are still somehow getting the can. Not that long ago, I was shouting out Roll7 for being the best studio of 2022, putting out two of its best games in OlliOlli World and Rollerdrome. The latter actually got a ton of coverage on YouTube as well. For an indie game, it seemed to do pretty well for itself. And now here we are, not even 2 years later, and the whole studio's been shut down. Xbox was parading Hi-Fi Rush everywhere. It was acting like it was the cure to syphilis. They talked about how games like that are crucial to their portfolio, and I agreed. I thought, man, bigger studios making smaller budget, shorter length games between their big haymakers is a great move, and the industry at large should learn from that. Plus, it was showing how versatile Tango could be as a studio, and then a year later, that's shut down as well, and Xbox is still singing Hi-Fi Rush's praises even after gutting the studio that made it. How ridiculous is that? Arcane Austin being shut down is a little bit more understandable just because of how poorly Redfall did by all metrics, and it wasn't really improving much either. Plus, Arcane Leon is still alive and kicking, and some people are going to be moved over to that, so that's good. But what's been made abundantly clear from all of this is that the window for failure is now slimmer than my bitch figure. One bad game that's been clearly significantly interfered with by greedy higher-ups and the whole studio's gotta go down? That's insane. I guess it just sucks to come face to face with the fact that everything's a business, no matter what. Even though it's something that we all know already, we're not oblivious to that fact, knowing it and feeling it are two very different things. We know games are taking longer to make than ever, budgets are ballooning, live service games are handily snatching up the majority of profit shares, and they become such a time sink that they suffocate the gaming market. We know the landscape is changing and that games need to adapt to the demands of the audience, but that doesn't make it pleasant seeing the blatant disrespect shown to developers in the midst of gaming's statistically most popular years just because the big companies are all consolidating and acquiring talent just to shed them right after. And then you go online and all the peanut-brained console warriors are having a fight that ultimately hurts them and the people making games and only really affects the bottom line of John Executive and Peter Marketing. I feel like being part of this industry more and covering it more for videos and wanting to be a bigger part of it as an aspiring developer, I've started to lose a lot of the childlike wonder around it all. And I always knew that was a possibility. Don't mix business with pleasure unless you want to see how the sausage gets made or whatever. But that understanding still doesn't actually prepare you for actually experiencing the loss of that pure thing in your life. When you start looking at this thing that you used to view with so much admiration when you had no clue what was going on behind the scenes, it was just a love for the art that drove your interest, and then all of a sudden you realize that the love you show for the art ultimately breeds no respect or job security for the people behind it, it's really difficult to stomach that. And it's an inevitable thing to have this realization. You kind of have to grow up and realize that creativity and business are kind of inseparable at this point, and that doesn't mean that I'm not still a huge fan of games and the culture and the art, but I guess when you're more naive, it's easy to convince yourself that if I support these games, if I engage with the community on public forums, if I tell my friends about it, if I watch videos on it, it'll do something. Even if the game doesn't end up raking in bundles of cash for the studio, there's merit to something that breeds a strong community, be it personal validation for the developer or a strong enough fan base for a publisher to want to keep it around for potential sequels or merch sales. Plus, who knows, maybe they can be transformed into something even bigger if given enough time. Look at how Returnal became a bit of a low-key hit from an initially very small studio making a lot of low profit margin games in a dying genre, but the games were good and they had their fans, and so Sony let them ride it out for a little bit until they made something that became a significant part of PlayStation's catalog. But more often than not, it just doesn't work that way, and it makes me really worried for studios like Remedy, for example. Even though I haven't loved all of their games, I think Quantum Break was a bit of a misstep, and Control is a little bit shakier than people like to say it is. They're still making very unique, expressive works of art that definitely end up paying off every once in a while. I mean, I think Alan Wake 2 is nothing short of a masterpiece. It's unbelievably good. So it's really nice seeing that they have more games in the chamber and support from bigger studios, and that makes it seem like they're in a pretty safe spot, but Alan Wake 2 still, somehow, even after all of the love and all of the awards, is struggling to make back its budget. And at this point, if a studio can't prove that it's able to be consistently and radically successful, especially in the live service space, they're kind of perpetually on the chopping block, it feels like. Given how even seemingly successful projects that are championed by the publishers that made them still can't save studios from being cut, it makes the news of a great game underperforming that much harder to swallow. And that's not even bringing up that the expectations for success are becoming nearly unobtainable. Insomniac is putting out hit after hit, breaking records, putting out more games than all of PlayStation's other big studios combined, and they're still being forced to cut a good chunk of their staff? How is that even possible? I do think we're seeing the beginnings of a permanent change to this industry, and it's a really tough and uncomfortable change that is not showing the proper respect to the people that make the things that we love, but it also feels somewhat unavoidable. Live service games just make way too much money. One mega hit and it offsets like 100 of these single player games that you're about to make. I honestly think that AAA is going to become next to entirely live service in some capacity by like, I don't know, 2030, and then budgeting and team sizes for single player stuff is going to be more akin to what we consider as AA today. Maybe I'm spewing total horseshit. I mean, I know a lot of people used to say that single player is dead right before we got one of the biggest single player booms ever, so who knows what'll really happen, but in a world that's getting more and more subscription and microtransaction based, the games that charge a flat fee are just at a disadvantage business-wise. But while I do think that things are tough and it's hard to be positive about the trajectory of the industry, I also want to say that I think art in any field finds a way to persist no matter what. It has to always adapt and change with the times, but it only ever goes away when we stop caring about it. You may have noticed that in a few recent videos I've made a lot of mentions to the intention behind creating games and art, and why we should continue to champion the small, seemingly insignificant things that we love to theorize and obsess over, even if it doesn't necessarily equate to the financial success of the product. And that's been a big theme recently because I've been thinking a lot this year about whether our love for the art behind games actually does matter at the end of the day. Every day it feels like a new studio is getting kicked to the curb or pushed into making a style of game that they clearly don't want to. Legions of Twitch streamers and fans will echo out that all that matters is if a game is fun, it doesn't really matter what the artists think. And then you look at the sales at the end of the year and you go, Call of Duty was at the top again? That series has like one good entry in the last 8 years if we're being generous. And meanwhile, something like Alan Wake 2 can't even make its budget back? It's just so easy to get sucked into the cynicism and doubt behind everything and feel like throwing in the towel. Maybe this stuff doesn't matter. Maybe I was silly to care about it in the first place. But it's always good to remind yourself that good, honest, emotionally charged art has always and will always be important. Even when it's treated with disrespect or ungratefulness, life is emptier without it. So if you're a dev that's recently lost their job or is worried about the current climate of gaming and you're wondering if it's time to give up, obviously if that's the best thing for your health and sanity, don't let me stop you. It's very understandable to want to leave this thing behind. But if you're not quite done with it yet, just remember that we always find a way to keep art alive. It might not look the same way that it has the last 10, 20, 30 years, but this isn't where we die. We have more to say, we have more to do, we have more innovations to make and more stories to tell, and there will always be people who are willing to experience that with us and share it amongst themselves. Maybe the indie scene gets transformed through all of this, maybe reliance on publishers gets waned off slowly, I don't know, but this is far from the end of the road. That's it, bit of a different video, obviously, back to our regularly scheduled programming after this, but this is just something I wanted to address up front because it's been bugging me for a while. Leave some of your favorite indies or underrated gems in the comments below so that somebody might find something new that they love, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Peace.